Welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Hall, and I'm a creative inspiration coach who helps writers reignite their creative sparks. This podcast is here to help you knock down any barriers that stand between you and your dreams. You can do it. Join me. Hello, and welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. This is podcast 36, The Observer. Today, I'm having a really good day just because I am working on getting some results, and it always feels so good when you can get results for any kind of goal that you're making. It's still January 2018 as I record this, and it just feels really powerful to start seeing myself put together the goals and making plans and doing things and putting them down on a calendar and just seeing the results come to fruition. So if you're someone who wants to change your life for the better and you want to see your life improve, then something I definitely suggest, and many life coaches and famous successful people will say this too, make a plan and set goals and commit to those goals. Make them kind of bite-sized and small and easy to complete a little bit at a time, and then complete them, and you'll be amazed at the results you will actually achieve if you do that. So I'm excited today because I can actually see some results coming to fruition, and that just helps to build our mindset. When you can complete something that you started, it makes you so proud of yourself, and it just fills you with confidence and satisfaction. It feels fulfilling to your overall mindset and emotions and all of those things. All your thoughts start to turn more positive when you do that. So if you're someone who is trying to change your lives for the better and really make a difference in your life and get those results that you're wanting, then I definitely suggest getting one of those planners or calendars that you can visibly see what your plan is every day or every week, and really write them down and make those goals and then stick to them. Don't put your planner away in a drawer or your calendar. Put it out visibly where you can see it, and then go through each goal and complete it as you go. And each time you get to check off a goal and it feels like a result, it feels good. And especially when doing that little bit at a time in your goal, when you actually do get that result at the end that you've been looking for, whether it's weight loss, whether it's money, whether it's setting a career goal for yourself, I want to achieve this by this time, whether it's finding someone to share your life with, whatever it is that you want to improve in your life, you really can make those goals and stick to them and make them happen as long as you're in a positive mindset. And then that just builds and builds and builds. The more positivity and the more that you complete, the more results that you see, it just kind of rebounds, and that's when miracles start happening. So if you're in that place and you want to see goals that you want to complete and you want to see the results, then start doing that, even if it's just baby steps. Once you see those results, you'll get more confidence and you'll be able to move forward without resistance, without as much negativity creeping up and doubt creeping up. And then when that doubt and negativity does creep up, you'll be able to squash it and say, I know I can do this. I'm a badass. And it will make you feel so empowered and so good. So on with the show. Okay, so today I'm talking about the observer, and what that is it is a spiritual concept And what it basically means is that you are distancing yourself from your own thoughts and feelings. And when we're here on this earthly plane in these earthly human bodies of ours, it's so easy, so extremely easy to get really mired or bogged down in those concerns of our daily lives because we're here and we're in the midst of it. And it's hard to see anything else but our troubles and our concerns. And we forget who we really are. We forget that we're spiritual beings who are eternal and everlasting. And we get all lost in the stress of the day, the traffic and the work and the kids and the relationships and the family and the finances and a million other things. We get lost in that. And when you're going through like a really difficult time, it's really easy to sink down into negative emotions and get trapped there. And, we think of emotions like frustration, anxiety, irritation, anger, fear, depression, all those emotions as being negative. But what they can be is something else. They can be an impetus for change. They can be a catalyst to jumpstart improvements in our lives if we let them. And our minds, our brains, which are used to being efficient, and that's what it wants to be. It wants to keep doing what it's doing right now. So if you've been doing the same thing for years, that makes your brain feel really comfortable and it wants to continue to do that because you're already good at that. Even if that good is just sitting in front of the TV eating chips, right? Being a couch potato. If you're really, really, really good at being a couch potato, then that's what your brain's going to try and continue to make you do. And if you try and change that, you're going to have doubts and fears and all sorts of things pop up because it's a new pattern for your brain. And it's like, whoa, 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 we were doing good and fine and we were safe when we were on that couch eating those chips. Even if you weren't safe. Even if you were making yourself a diabetic and obese and giving yourself all kind of health problems because you weren't exercising, your brain doesn't see it that way. But we have to be smarter than our brains and distance ourselves from our brains a little bit. And that's where the observer comes in. So maybe we are in these different situations that are stressful in our day. So maybe we have an argument with someone. And maybe a thought that we have, that sentence in our head, as Brooke Castillo calls it, is maybe we think, what a jerk, right? Or maybe we think, I can't believe she spoke to me that way. Or maybe we think, I'm right, so I don't know why he's fighting with me. Or maybe we think, I am so sick of her attitude. Or etc., etc. We all have these thoughts when we're in an argument. And these thoughts tend to lead to confrontations and feelings of resentment, and we make incorrect assumptions about other people and all sorts of things. And if a friend or a family member neglects to call us or text us back after we called or text them, our minds might go straight to fear. So like we start to wonder, it's like I texted them an hour ago, why haven't they texted me back, right? And so our minds start to go to all these worst case scenarios, like, what if they were in an accident, right? Maybe they, like recently I pocket dialed my boss at work. And she was off that day, and I accidentally slipped my phone into my purse, and apparently I hit something, and I called her and didn't realize I did. And she calls me back all panicked, saying, I thought you were in an accident or something, because she knew I was on my way home. So, what does our brains do to us? Our brains make us think the worst possible situation. And of course I hadn't been. I just pocket dialed her accidentally from my purse. But she jumped to the worst conclusion because that's what our brains do. Our brains do that to us all the time, and they make us think, oh God, it's the worst thing ever. So that's what happens. And usually the explanation is something very benign and innocuous like mine. It was a pocket dial. Or maybe they had a phone that they didn't charge, so it died on them. Or maybe they had it on silent mode or do not disturb because they were watching a movie. Or maybe they were at work. They're not allowed to get phone calls, so they had it on silent. Maybe they just forgot they had it on silent for some other reason and didn't notice it. So a million different reasons could be why they're not calling you or texting you right back. But our minds tend to jump to the worst possible conclusion. Or maybe we have a really great date with someone or a really great interview for a new job, but then they never call us back. And so our minds immediately jump to these conclusions of, we get these horrible thoughts of unworthiness, we feel ugly, we feel unattractive, we feel nothing but doubt in our abilities, and it makes us second guess ourselves and feel really crappy. But there is a simple and effective method to stopping these automatic reactions that we have. And it's called putting some distance between you and your thoughts. It's called becoming the observer. So when you realize that your thoughts are just slightly separate from you, that you are having thoughts, but you are not your thoughts, it's very, very empowering. Because then you realize you're in control of your thoughts. You're in control of your brain. You can distance yourself from your thoughts and look at them without feeling the entire brunt of what those thoughts make you feel, because your thoughts lead to your feelings. So if you're thinking the thing, let's say that the sentence in your head, the thought in your head is, I'm so bad at this, right? I'm so bad at this. Like for me, for example, I'm a kind of a geeky girl and a nerdy girl and always cared about my grades and things like that. But I was very strong in most subjects, and especially like English and that kind of thing, which makes sense since I'm a writer now. But the problem that I had was I really struggled with like the higher math stuff, like algebra and all that kind of stuff. Trig and geometry and all those kinds of concepts just kind of blew my mind in a bad way. I just couldn't wrap my mind around them whenever I was a teenager in school. So I would tell myself, I suck at math. I just suck at math. Do I really suck at math? No. I struggled with the higher concepts of certain mathematics, right? It doesn't mean I can't do it. It didn't mean that I failed, because I didn't. I would get a C, which I didn't like, but it was, for that I would accept it because I struggled with that subject. It wasn't something that came easily to me. But telling myself, so by the time I got to college, I'd taken like 4 of these classes and I got a B, like in one, I was so happy. But most of the time I got a C, and by the time I got to college, I accepted a C in math as just what comes to me, because I sucked at math. That was the thought that I had about math at that point in my life, was I suck at it. Even though I hadn't always sucked at it, that's the thought I had in my head. And so when I took a college math class, the one math class I did take in college, what did I get? A C. Because I had in my mind that I sucked at math and the best I could do was C-level work. Now, is that true? Math is not something I enjoy, but I know that if I really applied myself and studied and got maybe a tutor or something and really focused on it, could I do better? Of course. We have so many gifts, and because we have access to the divine, we are connected to the divine. So we're connected to divine wisdom, and we have all the information that we need. We have access to that. And literally, now we have smartphones. In the palm of our hands, we have access to all this information and all this help. So even without being connected to the divine, we have that too. So we have both. We have double connections to every piece of wisdom we could ever need. And yet we tend to tell ourselves, oh, I can't do that, or I suck at that, or I'll never be able to achieve that, or I'll never be able to lose this weight, or I'll never be able to get a better job, or I'll never make $100,000 a year, or $1 million, or whatever the number is. I'll never crack that, right? That's what we tell ourselves, and then that becomes our belief. Because we tell ourselves that. We have those thoughts over and over again until they become our belief system. And then we really do struggle to make that happen because we don't believe we can. But that's a lie. And you can change your belief system whenever you want to. So like I was saying, I am a geeky girl, and so I love Star Wars, for example. I've kind of referenced that before. And I'm fully well aware that human beings do not actually have Jedi mind powers, right? It'd be cool, but we don't, okay? So we cannot feel when a big tragedy happens, generally speaking. We're not Obi Wan Kenobi. We're not going to feel it when there's a disturbance in the Force because a planet was destroyed. I'm not saying never. There's certain, I guess, instances of that happening. But by and large, most of us, something major can happen in a part of the world that we don't know about. And we don't know anything about it, so we don't react. We don't feel anything about it. Okay? So let me use the same example life coach Brooke Castillo uses when talking about things that we don't actually know about, so we don't react to them. If someone dies, you do not immediately react unless you know about it, right? So if some big tragedy happens, unless we're directly involved with it, we're not going to feel it and we're not going to react to it. Yet most of us consider someone's death to be a really sad thing, like one of the worst things. Most of us, we feel that one of the worst things that could ever happen to anybody is to lose someone you love, especially someone you love the most in the world. That's why losing a beloved spouse or losing a child is considered to be one of the worst things that can ever happen. Or if you're super close to a friend or a family member, a parent, grandparent, whatever, and you lose that person, it's devastating. And it's totally understandable that that's the case. But not every death is devastating, right? What if you didn't know that person and they were personally, let's say, and they were over 100 years old and they went peacefully in their sleep after having this amazing life, right? I know me personally, when I hear about somebody like that, I'm like, that's awesome. They got to 102. That is amazing, right? That's someone who lived life to the fullest. They really, went and took care of themselves and lived a long time, and that's cool, right? My gut reaction, at least personally, is not, oh, that's sad. Even though it is sad that they died, there's going to be people who love them and miss them, of course. But for me personally, my reaction tends to be, oh, that's kick-ass that they lived to that long a lifespan. That's cool. Go dude or go girl, right? Or what if that person was suffering from some horrible injury or disease that couldn't, in our current medical knowledge, be cured, or couldn't be the pain, we couldn't stop their pain. And so they were living for years in this horrible, debilitating pain. What if they were actually happy to die, right? In that instance, are we going to feel sad? Maybe we would feel, if we knew them, we would probably feel sad. But what if we just knew of someone like that and we know that that would give them relief and peace? Then maybe sadness isn't the first emotion that we feel. But we get so caught up in our emotions that we immediately react to them and we get overwhelmed by them sometimes. And that's where it's very helpful to become the observer and kind of distance yourself back away, step back from your emotions a little bit so that you can look at it from a new perspective. It takes some of the sting out of the emotion, especially like a negative or painful emotion, if you can step back and observe it instead of completely inundate yourself with it and be overwhelmed by it. And the thing about our thoughts and our feelings is that we are in control of them, especially from the observer standpoint, because we can back away and look at them and realize, oh, I get to control that. This circumstance happened, But I don't necessarily have to feel bad about that, right? Let's say your boss yells at you at work. Most people would react in a negative way to that. Either maybe they'd get angry, maybe they'd quit their jobs, maybe they would start beating themselves up. I knew I screwed up. I shouldn't have done that. I'm such an idiot, right? So we're all guilty of that, I think. But what if instead of doing that we just saw that the boss is yelling is just the boss is yelling, right? Maybe the boss had a bad day. Maybe we had nothing to do with that yelling, but we just received it because we happened to be there. I think we've all been on the brunt of that. We've been on the losing end of the stick on some of that stuff sometimes, where our boss had a bad day and we didn't actually do anything wrong, but we got yelled at anyway. That has happened to many of us. But how we react to it is up to us. And that, as Brooke Castillo also says, is some of the best news ever, because we get to choose how we feel. So if you get to choose how you feel, you can choose to feel happy, right? You can decide to think thoughts that make you happy, or at least not upset, right? So the boss, like I know, for example, I had a boss one time years ago that yelled at me when I wasn't even the one who did it, right? Someone forgot to do something, and it wasn't even me, it was my supervisor. And yet she came and yelled at me for my supervisor's mistake. It doesn't even make sense, right? It's not logical. You know, I can think whatever I want about that person, right? That boss that yelled at me for somebody else's mistake. But I can also choose to say, you know what? She was a little out of her mind that day. It had nothing to do with me, so I'm not going to take offense to it. I'm not going to feel bad because she yelled at me for somebody else's mistake. That's her problem, not mine. So that way I don't have to be upset by it. I don't have to be angered by it. I just get to say, you know what? That boss, man, she was crazy. You know, I never knew what she was going to do. And that day she yelled at me for somebody else's mistake. Oh well. But I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to feel bad and beat myself up for something I didn't even do. It's a choice. All of our emotions and all of our thoughts are a choice. And that's so important to remember. And when we can remember to be the observer and take a step back, gain a new perspective, it'll help so much, especially in a difficult situation. So think about historic events. It's kind of easy to be the observer in something like that because it's something that happened a long, long time ago. So like in many ways, the bubonic plague, when that broke out across Europe, was a horrible, terrible tragedy. And if we were living during that time, well, I'm sure we would have felt a lot of fear and sadness because of the events that would have transpired all around us. It was a very serious, big event. And lots of people died. But looking back at it through the lens of time, you know, a lot of time has passed since then. And nobody is now alive who was affected by it. So now we can look back at it and see that that time of horrible death and tragedy actually ended up leading to the Renaissance, a time period where, because there were fewer people, everybody got to eat more of what was left of the food. So people who were starving before, there was a lot of starvation and poverty and bad situations at the time. But because of sadly, all of the death that happened because of the plague, the people who survived it were able to flourish. It's just kind of ironic and it's still kind of sad, but ended up there was a good result out of it. And from the Renaissance, we had creative thinkers and innovative thinkers like we've never had before in history. And many new advancements happened for society at that time for the first time ever. So how you feel and think about something really depends on if you personally are affected by it. And when you can become the observer of your own thoughts, even if you are directly affected, you can feel more calm and more rational. And you can deal with even very strong negative emotions because you get to realize that you are not your thoughts or your feelings. You're much more than that. You can separate yourself from them. And no feeling or emotion will kill you or harm you. It's just a vibration in your body. And it's your reaction to it that's going to cause more harm. So like over the holidays, for example, we just had Christmas. I witnessed two men in a parking lot that were screaming each other stupid. It was crazy. And what had happened apparently came after the fact. So I think what happened was that one had backed his vehicle into the other. And they just lost their minds at each other. They were screaming, yelling. I was getting ready to see if I need to call the police because it was pretty bad. And most of us would be upset or angry if someone backed into our vehicle, right? Our car. And it's understandable. But would us screaming at the person who backed into us solve the problem? No, of course not, right? It's not going to help. And if we lose control of our emotions and we get so angry and upset that we get in a fist fight, is that going to be worth anything? Is that going to help at all? What could happen is an assault charge. We could end up in jail. It's crazy. So what if those two men involved in that had taken a step back to become the observer of their situations for a second? Maybe that yelling match never would have happened. And maybe they wouldn't have been so heated over it. Maybe they could have resolved their issue much faster. Now, they didn't come to blows over it, thankfully. But they were both very loud, and it really could have easily gone to that. And so I know that I have personally benefited from being able to observe my feelings from a little bit of a distance and disassociate myself a little bit from a circumstance. Because there was one time that, and this was actually before I found spirituality, but I still found myself doing that. Looking back at that I can see that's what I did. I was just driving in traffic, and it was a situation where two lanes merged into one, and there was this guy in a minivan. And he came up behind me really fast, raced up behind me, pulled over into the other lane really quickly to cut me off, or was trying to. But I was already in the lane right behind another car. And when I didn't slow down and make room for him, he honked at me. He nearly hit my car, and he flipped me off. And in that split second, I was super angry, and I flipped him off too. I'll admit it, right? I'm human. I messed up too. And the guy sped away all crazy. He was driving erratically. And I've never flipped anyone off before then, and never since. But something in me just kind of, for some reason, automatically backed away, and I became the observer of the situation. And suddenly everything was just uproariously funny. I just thought it was freaking hilarious. And I just burst out laughing, and I'm hitting my steering wheel. I'm laughing so hard. And it was just so, I just realized how completely ridiculous it was. And how over the top it was. And I was laughing so hard just at the whole silliness of the situation. I was like, what is wrong with that dude, right? What was he doing? So being the observer can be a really great way to deal with a situation that might have made you angry or upset, or any other emotion that might be considered negative, and help you to get out of it and see things from a new perspective. And just laugh at it whenever possible, right? Nothing's worth getting that upset over most of the time. Especially not some guy in a minivan, right? Acting crazy on the road. And what's really funny is it felt really good to laugh that hard. And I'd never flipped anybody off before, so that kind of felt good too, because it's kind of out of character for me. So I think I was just laughing at myself as much as anything else. Just for my crazy reaction, for actually reacting that way. And it just felt so silly. But I released it all out of me by laughing so hard. So it's, and I still think it's funny to this day. So in your own life, when some big bad emotion shows up, whatever it might be, See if you can distance yourself and become the observer for a moment. And you'll find out how much more in control you'll feel when you separate yourself from the situation. So let me know if it helps. Hopefully this podcast has helped you today, and if any other episode has helped you, please say so in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day, week, month, and year. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I appreciate every download and every person who has subscribed. I release new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday, so if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a review. The more reviews fledgling shows like mine receive, the more visible it becomes on the various podcast stations. Each review helps, so if you enjoy what I've been sharing, please help others find this show by leaving a brief review. Thanks again for listening.